Hey again, and welcome back with this new video. In this video, we do questions and answers about aircraft engine instrument systems. As we always do, we leave a pause after every question so you can answer. Let's start. Question 1. The thermocouple leads used to measure cylinder temperature on an aircraft reciprocating engine? The thermocouple leads used to measure cylinder temperature on a reciprocating engine connect to the electrical wiring on one end and the cylinder on the other end. Question 2. Do engine oil temperature gauges indicate the temperature of the oil? The temperature indicated on the oil temperature gauge is the temperature of the oil as it enters the engine. Oil inlet temperature gives an indication of the efficiency of the oil cooling system. It lets the pilot know whether or not the oil entering the engine is too hot for adequate heat removal. Question 3. In a turbine engine, where is the turbine discharge pressure indicator sensor located? A turbine discharge pressure indicator sensor is located immediately aft of the last turbine stage. The turbine discharge pressure is used with the compressor inlet pressure to find the EPR. Question 4. What instrument on a gas turbine engine should be monitored to minimize the possibility of a hot start? The TIT or EGT of a gas turbine engine is monitored to determine whether the start is normal or if it is a hot start. Question 5. The RPM indication of a synchronous AC motor tachometer is governed by the generator? The RPM indication of a synchronous AC tachometer is governed by the generator frequency. The tachometer generator used in this type of system is a permanent magnet generator whose output frequency is determined by the speed it is turned. Question 6. If the thermocouple leads were inadvertently crossed at installation, what would the cylinder temperature gauge pointer indicate? The cylinder head temperature gauge is a current measuring instrument that measures the current produced in the thermocouple. If the thermocouple leads were inadvertently crossed at installation, the indicator would read backward, which would cause the pointer to peg out on the low side of the scale. Question 7. In what units are turbine engine tachometers calibrated? Gas turbine engine tachometers are calibrated in the % RPM of the compressor. It is much more important that the pilot know whether or not they're operating the engine at its peak speed or an overspeed condition, than it is to know specific RPMs. Question 8. The fuel flow indication data sent from motor-driven impeller and turbine, and motorless type fuel flow transmitters is a measure of? The fuel flow indication data sent from a motor-driven impeller and turbine, and a motorless fuel flow transmitter are measures of mass fuel flow. These fuel flow meters take into consideration both the volume and density of the fuel. Question 9. Engine pressure ratio is the total pressure ratio between the engine pressure ratio is the ratio of the turbine discharge total pressure, measured at the aft end of the turbine, to the compressor inlet total pressure, measured at the front end of the compressor. The total pressure is the pressure a column of moving air has when it is stopped. Question 10. A change in engine manifold pressure has a direct effect on the mean effective pressure inside the cylinder of a reciprocating engine is the average pressure in the cylinder during the power stroke. This average pressure is affected by both the manifold pressure, the pressure of the air as it enters the cylinder, and the compression ratio of the engine. Question 11. The fuel flow indication system used with many fuel-injected opposed engine airplanes utilizes a measure of? The fuel flow indicating system used in the continuous flow fuel injection system, installed on horizontally opposed engines, is actually a pressure gauge that reads the pressure drop across the injector nozzles. The pressure drop across the nozzles is a function of the volume of fuel flowing through them. Question 12. A common type of electrically operated oil temperature gauge utilizes? The most generally used electrical oil temperature gauges for aircraft engines uses either a Wheatstone bridge or a ratiometer circuit. A temperature probe consisting of a coil of thin wire encased in a stainless steel housing senses the temperature of the oil. The resistance of the wire changes as the temperature changes. This change of resistance is indicated on the instrument as a change in temperature. Question 13. A red triangle, dot, or diamond mark on an engine instrument face or glass indicates. A red triangle, dot, or diamond mark on an engine instrument face or glass indicates the maximum limit for high transients such as starting. Question 14. The engine pressure ratio is determined by? The engine pressure ratio is the ratio of the turbine discharge pressure to the compressor inlet pressure. It is used as a measure of the thrust produced by an axial flow turbine engine. A ratio is found by dividing one term by the other. In this instance, the turbine outlet total pressure is divided by the engine inlet, compressor inlet, total pressure. Question 15. A manifold pressure gauge is designed to? A manifold pressure gauge is an absolute pressure gauge used to measure the absolute pressure, the pressure referenced from zero pressure, or a vacuum, that exists inside the induction system of a reciprocating engine. Question 16. Which of the following is a primary engine instrument? If we consider the instruments required by the FAA for certificated aircraft as primary engine instruments, the tachometer is the only one of these instruments that is a primary engine instrument. Question 17. Instruments that provide readings of low or negative pressure, such as manifold pressure gauges, are usually what type? Because of their sensitivity, instruments which measure low or negative pressures are normally of the diaphragm or bellows type. Question 18. What instrument indicates the thrust of a gas turbine engine? In an axial flow gas turbine engine, the EPR varies directly with the thrust the engine is producing. Question 19. The purpose of an exhaust gas analyzer is to indicate the? The exhaust gas analyzer is used to indicate the fuel-air ratio being burned inside the cylinders. The modern EGT system measures the temperature of the exhaust gases as they leave the cylinders. This gives an indirect, or relative, an indication of the mixture being burned. Question 20. The fuel flow meter used with a continuous fuel injection system installed on an aircraft horizontally opposed reciprocating engines measures the fuel pressure? The fuel flow meter used with a continuous flow fuel injection system installed on a horizontally opposed engine is a pressure gauge that measures the pressure drop across the injector nozzles. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. We make more videos about aircraft oral studies. See you in the next video.